Chris, it's great to see you. A lot has changed for LSU in the last few weeks. Just walk us through this time of transition in Baton Rouge.
Yeah, that's one way to put it, Roger. Thanks for having me. It certainly is a been a time of transition. I think that's probably the best way I've heard it described here over the last week to 10 days. So yeah, a lot has changed, and it was nice. I'll be honest with you. I got the sense, really, from the fan base, all of us that work closely here at LSU. It was nice yesterday on Monday, I should say, for us to get back to football. Last week being the off week, which certainly I think all things considered came at a good time the way it worked out. It wasn't a lot about football from a standpoint of X's and O's. So I think that interim coach Frank Wilson on Monday kind of got everybody's focus back to that. That's not to say that Coach Wilson and the coaches weren't doing that during the bye week, but I think as a whole, everybody now is back to, okay, we've got a big important game against arguably the best team in college football as we stand here going into this weekend. So we got to get back to football. So that's kind of been a relief this week. And to be honest with you, you got to go into Bryant-Denny. You got to play again, as I said. I think probably right now the best team playing, and but it comes at a good time, believe it or not.
It really does. And for LSU, a tale of two seasons as well, starting the season with four straight victories and getting off to a winning start this year, but then losing three of the last four. What's been the biggest difference in the style of play or what we've seen on the field from the Tigers between the first half of the year to where we are now?
Well, I think, Roger, it starts in the fact that even though LSU got off to a 4-0 start, it wasn't as if, the fan base and a lot of the people who cover the program weren't asking questions about the inability of the offense from a consistency standpoint, obviously from a point standpoint. That was kind of like, wow, we're hanging everything on the defense now, but we certainly hope that the offense eventually will catch up and then maybe even supersede that defense, because also your schedule is going to get tougher as the year goes on. So I think both of those things combined are why LSU is in the position they're in now, and why decisions were made the way they were made. Is simply that improvement has not shown, has not come to fruition. And I think, again, it's easy to say, well, the defense has struggled. Yes, they have. When you look at LSU, you look at a team that really struggles to control the football. They're dead last or close to dead last in time of possession in SEC games. So what does that mean? That means that defense is out there extraordinarily too long. That was the case in Nashville against Vanderbilt. Certainly was the case in the first half against Ole Miss, and the same was true last week or last time out against Texas A&M. And oh, by the way, Alabama happens to lead the SEC when it comes of time of possession. Now, they may not necessarily do it the way they used to, running the football, but they're still able to maintain time of possession, and that's where LSU has to get better. And that starts with third down efficiency on offense, and at the same time, defensively, third down. But again, when you get to that second much time on the field, yeah, I think it's probably doesn't take a genius to figure out that third down defense is going to get weaker and weaker as the game goes on, especially against very good teams.
So Brian Kelly, no longer the head coach of LSU. And for Alabama fans, Chris, that are maybe hearing the name Frank Wilson for the first time, what can you tell us about him, the role he's had in this staff, and just kind of who he is as he steps into this interim role?
Well, Frank Wilson is a Louisiana guy, and he's worked and been successful at many different levels in football, all the way back to high school football and then into small college football, and then eventually Les Miles brings him back here to LSU, so to speak, as an assistant coach. And Frank cut his teeth and made a name for himself as a top-notch recruiter, and that's been evident everywhere he's been. He obviously was the running backs coach for Coach Brian Kelly before being named the interim head coach. But he's a guy who has a direct and intimate relationship with every player on the team. He's been involved at some point in their recruiting process, and more than likely has been kind of the finishing guy, so to speak. So, I think when you look at naming an interim head coach where LSU is at this point, it was a no-brainer to go with Coach Wilson. He was instrumental in having the number of guys who both came in as true freshmen as well as out of the transfer portal. So he's a guy who, as they say, the old cliche, more than likely the players would run through a wall if he asked them to do it. That's the type of relationship he has. And again, he's worked with some really good coaches. And I think from what I can tell over the last week or so, he's done a really good job into keeping everybody's focus on whether or not the playoff is out of the picture, whether or not all the team goals are out of the picture. At this point now, we're playing for the name on the front of the uniform, but don't forget you're playing for the name on the back of your uniform. So there are some guys who may decide to go to the transfer portal when all is said and done at the end of this year. Well, they want to make sure they look good and their tape looks good. You've got guys who have ideas about making it to the next level and going into the draft or maybe getting a free agency deal. They've got 4 games this year, if that's all the eligibility they have remaining, to make a name for themselves. So I think that's the way he's kind of motivating this team. Is look, we can't control what's happened last week. What we can control is how we play. And I think it'll be a different looking LSU team on Saturday. I really believe. I don't know if that's going to be good or bad. I just know it's going to be a different look.
And looking more on the field with this group, you mentioned a different looking LSU team, a changed offensive coordinator as well. What should we expect from this LSU offense, and who are some of the key playmakers our fans should know about?
Well, obviously, I mean, Alex Atkins is going to be the play caller. And Coach Wilson was quick to point out they really didn't put offensive coordinator. I think it's probably going to be offense by committee with Alex Atkins having be the man that'll take that information and then make the decision. So that from a coaching standpoint will be the difference. You know, on offense, it's a talented group individually. For whatever reason, they've not been able to really put it together as a team. And my biggest example of that, Roger, is that you can pick any game you want, win or lose. You're going to see a receiver suddenly have 8, 9 targets, maybe even 10, 11 targets, and maybe have 7 or 8, 9 catches, and they have a big day. Then the next week, it's another receiver who is targeted 11 times and maybe has 7 or 8 catches. But you're not getting 2 or 3 of those receivers involved in a single game. And frankly, with the inability that LSU has shown to not be able to run the football, it's not all that different from a year ago when this offense put up over 5,000 yards. They just haven't been able to get everybody in sync in a single game all season long. Now, Coach Wilson also says expect to see LSU stick with the running game. That's also been an issue for the Tigers this year. They've had some limited small doses of success, and then suddenly it goes away. Sometimes, as in last time out against Texas A&M, it's because they had such a meltdown in the third quarter that running the ball wasn't an option once you're down 2 or 3 scores. But there have been other games where LSU has either been in the lead or they've been within striking distance, but they've kind of went away from the running game. So I think a name to be familiar with, obviously Garrett Nussmeier at quarterback. Obviously, it'll be Aaron Anderson, who the Alabama fans know very well. It'll be Barryon Brown. It will be Trades Green, the tight end / receiver. And look for Harlem Berry. He's a freshman running back. Frank Wilson was absolutely instrumental in him coming to LSU. And over the last really 3 ball games, I think the biggest bright spot from an offense that's been rather anemic, Harlem Berry has been the story. So I think we'll see a lot of Harlem Berry on Saturday.
But how about on the defensive side of the ball, knowing that things haven't gone well there the last couple of games against Vanderbilt and Texas A&M, but what has to happen for LSU on defense?
I really believe that you got to get Whit Weeks back. And I know it's silly, and I pause when I talk about it because it's not one guy, and it's not necessarily forget the fact that Whit takes great angles. He's not the fastest linebacker you'll see, but he is very smart, and he knows the angle to take, and that's why he really roams the field sideline to sideline. So that's where you start. He's not been in the game since the Ole Miss injury. But I think from a bigger standpoint, it's him being the green dot, the quarterback of this defense. I think that's where the defense has struggled the most. And I'll point to the fact that, Harold Perkins has not been a factor. He was a factor at times, whether he made the play or impacted the play when Whit Weeks was setting the defense pre-snap. That's kind of gone away from him. There's been times where we've seen going back to 2 years ago where pre-snap there are players on the LSU defense looking at each other, looking to the sideline. That all was gone through the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season. And I think a lot of credit goes to Whit Weeks. And even talking to the coaching staff over the last several weeks, Rogers, they've told me, well, we tried the green dot with this guy and we tried it with this guy. Maybe we're going to split the responsibility with these two. That tells me Whit Weeks not being on the field has had an impact. Now, Do we know whether he'll play? Not at this point. Earlier in the week, it was questionable. We'll see. Probably a game time decision once again. But Whit Weeks, I think, is the heart and soul of this LSU defense. And without him out there, there's only so much he can do from the sideline. Secondly, I'd add, I think this matchup, based on what Alabama's been doing successfully this year, only averaging about 119 yards on the ground in SEC play, tells me it's going to be a battle of Ty Simpson, who I think is playing as well as any quarterback in the country right now, his receiving core, and LSU's defensive backs. We have seen Mansour Delane really be a guy who can be put out there on an island and hold his own against some of the best receivers in the conference. So I think that's where this game, obviously in the trenches is where it starts, protecting Ty Simpson. But I think if Alabama wants to throw the ball and have those passing lanes open, that's where the game will be won or lost. And it's going to be how LSU's back end of the defense can hold up. And they're much improved over last year and certainly 2 years ago.
So that's a look at football. Alabama against LSU coming up on Saturday. And Chris, before we let you go, I got to ask about basketball. We'll see the Tigers on the hardwood coming up later in the year, but just what's the feeling around this LSU program as you get ready for another season with Matt McMahon as head coach?
Well, the question I think is, how will they perform come January? This is a team that once again is totally rebuilt from top to bottom. Only 2 returning players from a year ago, led by Jalen Reed, who all indications are he's gotten stronger and better after the early season injury a year ago. But it's a team that looks like an SEC team, and what I mean by that is from their size on the front line and point guard play. Has improved dramatically. And I think when you play in the SEC in 2025, you've got to have frontline size and strength to compete, not necessarily just from a scoring standpoint, just to hold your own defensively. And then you got to have great point guard play. You have to have a great facilitator. And frankly, I think LSU's been without that for a number of years. So, I think the optimism is high. It's the best roster Matt McMahon has had up to this point. And we'll see. But I don't know that we'll have a good finger on the pulse of the program until we get to early January based on the non-conference schedule. So we'll just wait and see.
Well, Chris, we look forward to seeing you in Tuscaloosa this weekend. Just safe travels, and thank you for the time you've given us here on the Crimson Tide Sports Network. All the best.
Thank you, Roger. Always good to be with you. See you Saturday.